After a disappointing defeat in the first test against Australia, we're going to look at some of the talking points from that match and how we might look to change that given the second test this week. So I think one of the things that I keep hearing from reports since the match is that England are 5% from being the team we want them to be, for being those world beaters. And I think a lot of that comes from the fact that actually England in the first couple of phases of play looked good. So they were carrying hard, carrying with intent, good energy, and they were actually, we were committing players and getting the ball that we require. I think the problem is the later phase disconnection. So England are trying to play, or been openly saying they're trying to play this unstructured play, which in time, and if we look towards the bigger picture, could be a game changer, because we'll be coming up likely against France and Shaun Edwards' defence and other defensive teams. And if you understand how a team plays, you can kind of prepare a defensive team to negate that. If you're playing unstructured, who knows? We don't really know. It's all on hoof and, relies on those players making the decisions. But I think at the moment, and perhaps the difficulty in international rugby when players are not playing in that team all the time, is how do you then have those relationships? And I think at the moment, that's why we look particularly clueless as the attack moves on. And I think it also brings around other problems. So I think the next problem that we struggled with, and again, I think it's been reported by a few of the players, is that attacking breakdown. I think for last season, really, England have been a bit vulnerable here. I think Ireland and France particularly attack the breakdown out wide. And I know South Africa are also very good at that. So they actually select players who are going to attack hard and commit quite hard at that breakdown. And I think England are particularly vulnerable there. And I think what we saw in the game was when Curry went off in the second half, we lost that that person who would be there, that kind of Jackler type position. I also think that Australia kind of noted this, and suddenly they started to go in a bit harder. Hooper was getting in those positions, and they were committing more backs in that position. And I think they won ball there. So I think we really need to address that. I think the other linked thing is that this Forde-Smith axis, which again I think in long term could work, because traditionally 12 actually makes a lot of the tactical calls, because 10 is kind of looking at where the ball's coming from. And I mean, who better than Owen Farrell to be making those calls? But unfortunately, this wraparound play with feeding Marcus Smith in the pocket just became too predictable. No wonder that Smith was getting caught, because from a defensive unit, you knew what was going to happen. So you just kind of tracked him. I feel with Smith, he's a very much a feel player. He almost think of him more as like a quarterback. He'll use shorter plays, and then when it's on, he'll go. And I think it could work with Farrell, because I think Farrell is still his eyes, and Farrell can give him that feeding, that information. But I feel like they're being forced into this, trying this sort of pivot behind the back door type movement, and it's just becoming too predictable. Fair enough, have it. It could be really effective, but don't you overuse it, or you just drift out and pick off Smith, and it's just not as effective. And I think if that's going to work, they need to sort of vary it a little bit and maybe give Smith a little bit more control so he can dictate how they want to play. I think looking forward to the next match, I think we don't need to make wholesale changes. And I would be a bit reluctant in throwing young kids in, even though, as we've reported on here, I mean, I'm a big fan of Arundel and Van Poortvliet. See the videos on those bolters. And I think they showed what I believe they can do in the long term. But to put them starting in a second test, a must-win second test, I wouldn't do that. I think Cocker-Singer looked a little bit quiet for me. The guy, he's got everything to be a top player, and I'm no doubt, but actually he hasn't played a lot this season. He may be one of those players that just needs game time. So personally, I'd bring in Johnny May, who he also has not played a lot this season, but looked quite good in the Barbarian game. He's experienced, he's a competitive guy, and he adds that speed that we need. So bring him in onto the wing. Obviously, there's a little bit of a doubt around Tom Curry. I'm thinking, based on the new protocol, that he's probably not going to play. Lewis Ludlam came on really well, played really well. He's a slightly different type of player, perhaps not as Jacqueline type, more combative, but brings brilliant good energy and carries well. So I'd bring him in. And if we are, then I would look to still bring in Jack Willis. I think Jack Willis, as I keep saying, I think he's the best Jackler in Europe. And I think, given the platform and the actual confidence in national level, I think he could potentially be the best jackler in the world. I think he's that good. Plus, he carries incredibly well. So I think he's everything England are kind of needed. So I'd be tempted to drop Johnny Hill, who, I know there's a lot of talk around it, but actually I noted in the game that I felt his energy was better. And I think he actually seemed better from having that experience with the Lions, given, again, he's not played a lot of rugby. But I would drop him. I'd bring Laws into the second row, which said again, I think it's more effective. I think you then have better balance. You play Willis at 7, you have Ludlam at 6. Ludlam's a classic 6, really. And then Vunipola, who, again, a few people criticise, but I think he carried well. He draws in players. And actually, his ball handling skills were very good. And he was, I think, a little bit unlucky with the tackle. I think, unfortunately, those things still happen. You know, it was a yellow card, but I don't think there was any sort of malice or... I don't think he did anything technically wrong. I think it was just one of those circumstances. I think moving forward, England just need to simplify things a little bit more, be less predictable, and just maybe, just consider looking at that breakdown a little bit more and not getting so isolated, because quick ball will only come if you can actually deliver that quick ball. And at the moment, by getting isolated, we're just making ourselves vulnerable. So they're my thoughts towards the second test. Be good to get your thoughts on the second test, and we'll, and hopefully England can turn it around in the second test and make it a third test that's even more exciting.